Welcome back to New Money. This evening we're discussing healthcare. My guest is Clayton Samsudin, and if you'd like to email me, my details will appear on the screen. So now let's talk about, particularly for older people, nursing at home, carers. How can you effectively use a medical aid to try and help offset those costs?
So an important, I think, byproduct or upside from the COVID days was the introduction of virtual consultations. And that's typically what you're referring to, is where you could have a virtual consult with a nurse or with a doctor, and that would save, of course, a whole lot of travel and other. It's also, more efficient for both the nurses and the doctors. Some schemes provide, particularly in the primary healthcare space, they even provide access to nurse consultations at the pharmacy. So you could go to a pharmacy, go and see a nurse at this scheme of clicks, and that nurse can prescribe up to Schedule 2 drugs that you can obtain over the counter. And that saves, a lot of cost in terms of your medical savings account. What I'd like to say though, Bryan, just following up on the previous question we had about networks and GPs and so on, one of the things that we miss is that why is it that we're moving away from this medical savings account, which was, founded by Discovery Health? So I'm trying to say most of the new options don't have a medical savings account. We're moving back to almost traditional type
Traditional
option.
medical aid.
That's correct.
Going back 25 years.
That's correct, yeah. So
where when you didn't use it, you lost it.
That's correct. So we're circling back to that. And some options have a hybrid. So there's some insured benefits with some medical savings. So I'm almost trying to say, if there's a shift towards that, and I'm not saying it was, incorrect at the time, 25 years ago. What I'm saying is everyone must understand that the healthcare needs and the cost is not, the cost for members, the rising cost, is not helping anyone. And so we're getting to this point where we're moving back to almost an in-scheme traditional benefit structure, which I think is good for members and the scheme, because you understand exactly what you have. Now it's, you can go to an optometrist and blow all your medical savings for the year. Whereas if you have certain, let's say, benefits per category, you'll know exactly what to claim for and how and where.
Clayton, you used the word primary healthcare. Just explain for viewers who may not understand, what is primary healthcare? So
primary healthcare, in the terminology of a healthcare option, it's not a primary caregiver. We're not talking here about a GP, because that's what we would think about normally, like the day-to-day stuff. What had actually happened is that we had two names and consumers were confused. The one was a medical scheme and the other was medical insurance. So you'll understand, between scheme and insurance, members would be confused, what do I actually have? And so the name changed from medical insurance to primary healthcare plan. And so that would typically be your hospital plan, where you only have access to accidental trauma benefits, no illness, and a range of, quite comprehensive day-to-day cover. But that would typically be your, what was known before as your medical insurance plan.
It doesn't replace medical
No,
aid.
not of course. In fact, the legislation is very strict. You have to clearly state that a primary healthcare plan is not a medical scheme when you consult to clients and even the providers themselves.
Okay, so let's talk about screening. Let's talk about the procedures that one should be thinking about, because we talk about cost on the one hand, but the other hand is wellness.
Yeah.
How critical wellness is to avoid having to face all these possible comorbidities in the years to come.
Right.
So let's talk about what people should be thinking about when it comes to screening.
Yeah, so all medical schemes offer access to what we call the non-communicable diseases. So non-communicable diseases is where you go to have a wellness day at your employer or any pharmacy, and you can do, let's just say, your BMI, your blood sugar, your hypertension, and cholesterol and so forth. Now that's very important, because it falls under the banner of basic health risk assessments, and they are non-communicable. But once you understand that the NCDs have an impact on, mortality rates, then you'd understand that's the first thing I need to check. So if I know what my metrics are, I know what my status is, it's exactly the same principle. And you'll remember years ago with HIV, it was know your status, know if you're positive or negative. Same now, know, are you hypertensive or not? Do you have high cholesterol or not? Is your sugar within range or not? Is my BMI over or not? And once you understand that, you understand the downstream healthcare effects. And so I would recommend that you start there first. And that's a thing to get over with. The medical scheme pays for it. It doesn't come from your medical savings account. It doesn't come from your benefits. But get to know your status when it comes to those basic.
And also because of you know before, we've discussed on previous occasions people who've gone to get benefits in terms of get points for the discovery scheme, discovered ailments that they weren't aware of in the early stages. So let's just talk, how can members clearly distinguish between benefits covered under preventive care and then those paid from savings accounts?
Okay, so that's very simple. I'm saying simple because to access the information, but complex when it gets to certain schemes. So the simple answer is every medical scheme has a brochure about the screening and preventative benefits that they offer. All the members have to do is to access that. You'll understand what is paid for in full, what is going to cost, may have a co-payment, and with more developed medical schemes, let me say it, like with Discovery, you have a health fund that can fund a lot of that extra preventative and screening tests that you want.
Clayton, the big problem now is development of new drugs. Would have not yet been approved either in the USA or even in South Africa.
Yep.
I understand I've got a particular client who contacted and said the cost now of this drug that has not been approved is 45,000 Rand a month. Is this giving problems to the medical aids?
Yep, as well as drugs that are used off-label. So that means a particular drug that's used for one particular treatment could help cancer treatment on the other hand, but it's not indicated, it doesn't form part of the treatment protocol or the clinical protocol, and to get approval for that is really challenging.
So what do you suggest?
You speak to your broker who's supposed to take that further to the medical appeals panel at the scheme.
Well, that's what a broker's about.
Yeah.
A broker's not there just to submit your claim. That you must do under normal. Broker's there to help you a lot easier than to go through a call centre. Speak to your broker. At least you know who you're talking to. And then Clayton, let's go back to some emails. I've got email from Kenneth in Westcliff. He says, I'm a pensioner and belong to a very expensive medical aid. In addition to this, last year my wife and my medical expenses that were not covered by medical aid amounted to 180,000. What are your thoughts on this, and are we at risk of losing these tax credits? Well, I wish we could talk about tax credits, but if I can just make a couple of comments here for you, Kenneth. Every individual, take a family of two children, they are getting somewhere in the order of 1,200 Rand deducted off their tax. So if they play around with tax credits, then they could end up losing and paying more tax. And when we hear each year that tax has been, last year we had no tax rates being increased, however, they didn't increase the band. So everyone earning a bit more paid a bit more tax. As when it comes to pensioners, I'm in a similar situation. The first thing I did last year when we had those 3 different budgets was I got the budget just after the minister started talking. I quickly flipped to the medical to see if there were any comments on max medical tax credits. What do you think?
Firstly, I think that you can claim within certain limits, which is called an additional medical fees tax credit, not the part that's linked to your contribution. So expenses over a certain limit, you can claim back as an additional medical scheme tax credit. On the topic of the 180,000, I would wonder, if the member is not or doesn't have gap cover, because gap cover would have appropriately resolved that problem. So if the medical scheme paid a portion and a certain portion was not paid, with the right gap cover, that would have been an eligible gap cover claim.
Well, that may be very interesting, and maybe you should take that and contact me in the office, and I can pass your details on to Clayton. Then Dean in East London says, if I join a company, why is it compulsory for me to join the medical aid? And do I have any choice regarding which plan I join? So you look after a lot of corporates. So now someone joins. It's compulsory.
Not really. So the first thing we got to understand is that we're talking about an employment contract.
Yes.
So when it says it's a condition of employment, it means you must either belong to the medical scheme or accredited options of that employer if you are not a member of your spouse or partner's medical aid. So how do you circumvent this? Is get your spouse to join whatever medical scheme you want, you be the dependent, and you then don't have to belong to the employer's medical scheme of choice.
Okay, but if you do if you don't have those options, then when you join a medical scheme, the corporates you deal, do they have different category, different plans for different employees?
No, there's very few that would specify certain medical schemes and certain medical scheme options, but that's by design, because the subsidies are designed in accordance to that. But there's like very few that do that. There are those that would offer a medical scheme, but I think the issue here is maybe somebody that wanted another medical scheme than the accredited scheme by the employer.
Yeah. I'd just like to mention, we're coming to the end of our program, but I'd just like to mention, this is a book I wrote many years ago, Bryan Hirsch's Guide to Personal Finance. I've now put that onto film, and that film now is, I've partnered with a company called Thriver, which is with a double I. If you want to go through it and go through the course that I've prepared, you'll be able to get a lot of information, including healthcare information, on my book, Bryan Hirsch's Guide to Personal Finance. And if you want more details, you can always contact me. The last email we addressed confirms that I've been saying for many years. A broker earns a commission, and it is their responsibility to provide you with advice. If you do not currently have a medical aid broker, I suggest that you appoint one. While a broker is not there to assist with the day-to-day submission of claims, I can assure you that when problems arise, they will be far more helpful than the service provided by a call centre. Clayton, you've been a member and a guest of mine for many years. I hope people, what is your email address?
It's engage, ENGAEGE, at phoenixgrp.co.za.
And your team may be help them.
Yeah.
But it's important to note that our program is to provide information and should not be construed as advice. Next week's program we'll be dealing with short-term insurance. Thank you for watching, and good night.